Hello and welcome to the Smooth Scaling podcast, where we're speaking with industry experts to uncover how to design, build, and run scalable and resilient systems. I'm your host, José Quaresma, and today we had a great conversation with Angela Timofte, who was the VP of Global Engineering at Trustpilot, where she worked for over 10 years. We had a conversation mostly about the journey that she led from Monolith to event-driven architecture at Trustpilot, and about the considerations and trade-offs while on that journey. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast. Enjoy! Welcome, Angela.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
We have a few different topics, right? But mostly, or at least would like to start with the journey that you've been involved in at Trustpilot, specific around going from monolithical to event-driven architecture. Could we maybe start by you sharing with us a little bit, I don't know if it's the definition, but at least giving an overview of what for you is a monolith, and kind of on the other hand, what's an event-driven architecture?
Well, I'll start by saying that I've been at Trustpilot for over 10 years. And when I joined the company, we very much had a monolith architecture. And what I mean, or at least what it meant at Trustpilot, the monolith architecture, we had one machine holding all of our code and one database holding all of our data. So it was one in one place. And that was what we had and how I would describe monolithic architecture. Now, of course, an evolution of that monolith is to have multiple monoliths, and it kind of breaks the definition that I just said, like one place. But again, it's like the size of your application kind of defines if it's a monolith or not in my mind. And then when it comes to event-driven architecture, you can have some monoliths in that type of architecture depending on how you're structuring your code and your data. But in our case was all about how you handle the data. So the data is handled through events and you react to events. And that's how you build your architecture and how we did it at some point in that journey.
And then, so I think usually, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, that usually when talking about kind of monolith versus event-driven or versus microservices, there's also there's some people saying that it's sometimes okay to start with a monolith if that's what kind of, if you're just in the very early phases, that if you're starting already with a full microservice architecture, that you're kind of maybe overcomplicating to start with. So is that also how you see that? And maybe, I don't know if it's exactly what happened in Trustpilot, but that maybe in the very beginning it was okay that it was a monolith, but then you got to a point where you had to break it apart?
I mean, many times I've been saying that about Trustpilot where it started. I was constantly saying it was okay, the way that they approached the infrastructure, because they did not have clients and they didn't have users. So of course they started with something small with on-prem and all of that. It was also, this was 18 years ago when the company was founded. So technology was not where it is today. Today I might approach things differently. Also because of the skills people have, I might even from the start go with an event-driven architecture because of the cost, because preparing for the future. So I might approach things differently now, but back then I would say the company did the right thing. That's what people knew. That's where technology was at the time. So perfectly, I would say it depends on what you're doing and the type of business you have. Do you expect to have a lot of load even at some point in time, or actually the goal you have is to handle 100 users max? Then don't overcomplicate. Don't get an engineer that is like all about event-driven architecture because you don't need it. So it all depends on the type of business you have.
And in Trustpilot, when was it that you got to the point where kind of monolith was that you actually thought, oh, we actually should go ahead and start breaking it apart and go towards an event-driven architecture? How can you tell us a little bit, when did that happen, and what were the challenges or kind of symptoms that you started seeing?
Yeah, so it was actually at the time when I joined Trustpilot, when we started to break down the monolith. And there were a few reasons for that. One was more scale on our product, so a lot more users and companies that were using the product, which it was creating quite a few issues to handle the load. But then also internally, I joined the company in March 2015. And a few months after I joined, the company received a big investment. It was like 75 millions, was huge at the time. Even today it's huge. So then they started to hire a lot more people. And the problem that we're having with the monolith was that when we're trying to deploy something, I was physically going to the SRE guy to ask him to please prioritize my deployment. And I was hoping that I'm not going to break our production, because then they had to revert everything and it was not easy. And of course, everything was impacted, and making changes on the same piece of code, we constantly had to align. So as we were adding more people, even developing was very difficult. And then also the load, we had to constantly increase the size of the machine we were running our application, and the same with the database. So it was a few months after I joined, I started March. In September, we formed a new team, and that new team, I was part of it. Our responsibility was to create a new, to break down the monolith, both on the data side and on the infrastructure, so that we could prepare for more load.
And how did you go about that, breaking apart the monolith? Was it did you do it piece by bit? I think, is it strangling effect, where you start kind of getting pieces out of the monolith and putting them apart in a microservice? How was it the way that you went about it, and how long did it take?
So the first part was like that. We had one piece, and then we broke it in multiple. We kind of said like, hey, this is for the B2C, this is for the B2B, makes sense, this is internal admin and so on. So we broke it down in smaller pieces, but not all the way to microservices, because again, was not.
So it was more baby monoliths.
Remember, it was 2015.
Fair. Yes, check. Yeah.
The technology was not there to help us to go to event-driven architecture. So it was just smaller pieces of that big monolith. It took us probably a year or two to do some of that work. In this time, we also had to develop new products, because with new investment come a lot of new requirements, as everyone knows. So we had to develop new product at the same time. And then I would say going to event-driven was 2018, if I remember correctly, when Lambda function in AWS was launched. And someone can check my my dates here, but I believe it was 2018. They announced that the reInvent in December, the Lambda function, and then that's when we're like, okay, this is perfect for us, the type of load, the type of usage we have, and let's go all in on event-driven architecture with all the technology from AWS that supported that.
And that initial breaking down into the I don't know, I call it baby monoliths, but so not quite microservice, but was that, you mentioned two things. You mentioned some of the, I guess, the business requirements, and was that more on in being able to scale to handle the load, or was there other things? Because you mentioned that both that and then also the development part of making it very hard to coordinate changes across teams. Were those the two main drivers? Was it one more than the other, or was it more like a?
I would say it was a combination of both. To be honest, because everything was happening at the same time. We were hiring. We doubled the number. Like each month, we had doubled the number of people internally that we were hiring, and then also the load in terms of usage, users, businesses, that was also exponential. So yeah, we had to do all of this at the same time, which is why some of this re-architecture took us probably more than you would think, but it was because everything was happening at the same time, and most of us were new. So I had to kind of catch up on everything that the business was about in 3-4 months, and then I was moved into this new team that we created, which I was the one that knew the most, and I had 4 months in the business, but I was the
most senior
veteran.
person, yeah.
Yes, and I had to explain to the others, and I was like, but I actually don't know much myself, but we're gonna make it work. So yeah, everyone was new. Technology was developing super fast, and yeah, we had to learn with all the changes happening around us.
And from a technology perspective, how did you approach this transformation? So was there any specific guiding principles or design principles that you had in mind to kind of design the target state?
To be honest, I can't remember from when we broke it down into from big monolith to baby monolith. I think it was more about the context and keeping that was some of the guiding principles. But then when we went to event-driven architecture, that's when we made a very clear principle, and the one that we had a little bit later than 2018, can't remember the exact year, probably 2019, we set this principle in engineering that we apply serverless-first. And we're saying if you should first go to serverless technology. If that's not the answer, then go to containers. If that's not the answer, then the last option is a virtual machine, like an EC2. So we had that guiding principle to force people, because of course this was new to everyone. So no one had the skills on how you're supposed to develop with an event-driven architecture. So most of people were kind of of the opinion, but I know how to do things this way. I'm so much faster. Why should I do it differently? But that's weird. As a function, we believe that this was preparing us not just for the next year, which was kind of how we're developing in the past, but setting us up for the future, which is what happened. We didn't really have to do any big re-architecture since.
That's true. And how did that work? I'm just curious in practice. So if I would then come to you or kind of say, oh, I have this new service and it's in a virtual machine, I want to deploy it this way. Would you then kind of have a discussion on, okay, can you show me why is it, or tell me why is it that it didn't work as serverless, and why it didn't work as container? So you were kind of asking for proof or having a discussion about kind of why it didn't work? Yeah,
so the way we had we're a startup, and I would say we're like the classic startup where some of the things we did was to get an alert when someone would create a virtual machine, and then the entire function would be like, so why?
What are you doing? Okay,
yes.
Yeah. We need to talk.
And then we're still quite small, so we could gather up and be like, okay, let's brainstorm. Let's see, why did you choose this as the solution? And then multiple engineers will come around the whiteboard and then start drawing boxes and see, is that really the solution you would go for? And most of the time, we'll go back to, no, you can solve it with serverless architecture. So that was one of the small funny things that we did, which was alerting. And once we got much better, we started to show it all hands and meetings how many services we have in which type of infrastructure, and kind of celebrate constantly when teams would move fully from virtual machines to containers or to serverless.
Did you also have any discussions with any of the engineers at the time that did not believe that serverless was the right way? Was that something that came up often, or how was that?
I would say it was just at the beginning when no one understood how this new technology was working, and of course it had some limitations. So one big that it was not easy for us to convince people, but when they launched Lambda function, it was not supporting .NET, and we had all of our code on .NET, which meant people knew .NET. So with us going to a different type of architecture, we had to change the programming language as well.
Okay. And what did you have to change it to?
JavaScript, I believe, yes. And later on TypeScript. So that was a limitation, which came with like even more debates on why would we go for this. And I remember when they launched support for .NET Core was a big win for us because we're like, oh, now we're going to convince.
Did you go back to? I mean,
actually no.
Okay.
But it was a point of like people kind of being against moving because of the programming language, and then it's like, oh, .NET Core came in, and I remember I tested it out, and I was like, yeah, we can move, we can do all this, but then everyone was like, they kind of got used to not using .NET, and it's like, oh, why would we? Because it was still a little bit more complex on setting it up and everything. So, but it was like a discussion point and one argument that was brought, against maybe going full in on serverless.
So it sounds like you didn't mandate that everyone had to use TypeScript, let's say, or JavaScript in the beginning. So was it then kind of up to each of the teams to choose the kind of how much freedom did they have in choosing their tech stack or the language that the Lambdas were running on?
In the beginning, there was huge flexibility. We paid for it. I felt some of that myself. There was a lot of flexibility in the beginning, and each team were choosing what they would use. And one of the teams chose F# as their programming language.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that still alive? Not anymore, right? I did use it F# 10 years ago or so myself, so that was
well, I had to learn F# because the team that decided to use this programming language, they all left.
Okay.
And then I had the privilege, let's say, of inheriting all that
and migrating then,
it obviously because no one wanted to learn F#.
I think that's a very clear example of the trade-offs between giving people flexibility to make the choice and having to run a business and having people with a set of skills that can help grow. That's
and after that was a pivotal point for us because we learned that the hard way with the flexibility that we allowed. Then we had to pay back, and after that we set a tech stack that was approved. And if you had to go beyond that, you had to have a clear argument, because even today I don't believe in limiting anyone, but you need to have a good case for why.
So you were setting the guardrails or the frame for what is kind of the default or the kind of the first approach, but then also allowing for some emerging changes. Nice, very good. And you talk a little bit about the tech stack, right? And so can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what was the overall AWS tech stack in the event-driven architecture, or is? Yeah.
Yes. So we started, and even today we have most of our architecture is SNS, SQS, Lambda function, DynamoDB. That's kind of the setup, the main setup. And then yes, as AWS introduced new services, we do use a little bit of Event Bridge, and we had to use some other type of databases as well, like Aurora, and a bit of DocumentDB. And ECS. We do not use Kubernetes. That was a big wave that came in Trustpilot, as in all companies, with engineers being very passionate about Kubernetes. We tested out and we decided we don't need the complexity and what Kubernetes offers, and we stopped that. So no.
But was that then? Were you kind of already towards the Lambda work and the event-driven architecture? And then, so it was not a do we go Lambdas or Kubernetes? It was more you were kind of already in the journey with Lambdas, and then there was kind of the discussion of should we be using Kubernetes instead? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. We're already on the event-driven serverless architecture, and then Kubernetes came in. We had ECS, so when EKS came, and we had the discussion, but that's where it was like it did not make sense for us to go that way. So yeah, that's an EC2s, of course, we've been using, and I'm pretty sure there are still a few running there.
A few alerts once in a while.
Yeah.
And was there any kind of main trade-offs that you had to? We already talked a little bit about the trade-off more from a development perspective and flexibility, but on the infrastructure side, on some of the architectural decisions, are there any that come to mind when you were kind of deciding which of the services to use? Anything that
I would say in terms of architecture, like the way that we went about this, we went a little bit too hard on breaking things down to the smallest unit. And that's where today we have parts that are not microservices, but nano-services, which means the number of services we have to maintain, it's a very, very high. I
so
don't
you have
know
the orchestration complexity
on
the other
orchestration
side.
is there for sure. Also with us starting fairly early with the services from AWS, that's where we didn't really introduce any of the newer ones that might be easier to orchestrate, like the event bridge and the event pipes, because the engineers and all the setups that we had were encouraging for what I mentioned in the beginning: SNS, SQS, Lambda, Dynamo. Just go with it. We had all the templates to build that way, which also added to the number of services we have to maintain and orchestrate now. So that's another maybe trade-off that we had.
You did that journey. So did that in the end? Was it worth it? I mean, so we talked about in the beginning that there was we started our journey here with the Monolith that was both from a business perspective and the I guess I don't know if it's an ability or this, it was kind of the constant work to scaling it up to demand, but then also the challenges we had from a development perspective. Then 10 years later, when looking back and looking at kind of how you've been able to do, how would you rate kind of from those two perspectives? Did you get the return on your investment on that?
100%. I mean, it shouldn't even be a question. I would say because before moving to event-driven architecture, and that was a migration in itself, was not overnight. It took us years again. But before that, we constantly had to rewrite code, and to every new product feature, it needed so much investment to make it happen, and there was always a trade-off between what we could offer to our customers versus like what the technology is. While when we moved to event-driven architecture, we didn't have to have that conversation. And the way that I always talked to product and to designers, I always tell them, go and dream as big as you can, and then I'll set the limitations, but I never bring the technology as like, oh, we cannot do that because it will crash this service or that service, which before it was the first item. Can our infrastructure hold this type of usage? It's not even a question. That was a good investment, and I'm happy we did it early, even though it was tough. I'm happy we did it as soon as possible, because otherwise we would have made other type of migrations, but we would have done that every year, like, oh, another migration and another one, and we hit the limit of this technology. But with this type of architecture, it's like, well, it scales as you grow. It was perfect.
I think it would be a big problem if we've been talking about this and we wouldn't talk about traffic peaks, right? So that's a lot of what we talked about in this podcast. Did you have a Trustpilot kind of traffic peaks, and what were kind of were there any specific use cases that led to them?
Yes, I mean, as most companies, Black Friday, it's always a moment in time that also impacts Trustpilot, and that's where we, like in the beginning, we had to sit down 2 months before and prepare for the load that we knew will happen, and we had to scale up all of our services and so on. Another moment for us, it's usually January. And the reason for January is, well, people received their products and then they want to leave a review. And it's usually happening in January. So it's that period when we usually have a higher traffic peaks. And this was, it kind of became as a joke, was whenever we had the Christmas party at Trustpilot, almost every year in the beginning, we had an outage, some sort of an outage, and all the engineers were kind of ready to go back to work. So I don't know how we were kind of laughing. That is like, I think people are kind of watching when we schedule our Christmas party, and then they go and use Trustpilot. But that was kind of, it became a tradition of us having to go back.
Did you then cancel the Christmas parties, or no?
No, we moved to event architecture.
So that was the third reason.
That's why I'm very happy we did that. I could actually enjoy our Christmas parties. Those were like repeated every year. And then another big traffic spike that we saw was during COVID-19. So in 2020, when everything shut down and people had to move to ordering online. And in that period, like not everything you would imagine you would have to buy online. So you had to find new businesses. That's when, our traffic also boomed during that period.
A lot of people bored and upset with a lot of things. Yeah. Okay. And so that's more on the kind of the predictable traffic spikes, right? And in those, I guess you mentioned that you were then also preparing for them. Did you also experience some of them that were rather unpredictable? Anyone?
I mean, the COVID-19 was definitely unexpected, and we did not. I mean, now looking back, it kind of makes sense that people were going in that period to search on Trustpilot to see who they can trust, but it did come as unexpected traffic for us. So we didn't prepare anything. But that was a good exercise to see that even without us preparing, we didn't have any outage and we just scaled to the demand. So we could see that, and even now, even for the expected traffic, we don't have to change anything in our infrastructure because it scales with the demand.
Are there any cases that come to mind where you're like, okay, we have this under control, we have the system kind of in our ideal state, if that is ever the case, but now we can auto scale, everything works smooth, and then you actually found a new bottleneck somewhere. So is there anything comes to mind from such a case?
I'm trying to think if if I say no, everything auto scales perfectly, I'm sure someone will go and like
but you can
try
say
it out.
But you can say you don't remember, right? And that's fair.
No. To be honest, I mean, we had lots of unexpected events, and our infrastructure just worked, which I'm very proud of the stage that we've got. But of course, we got to this stage by many unexpected events that we had to then adjust. And we also run a lot of different programs with people trying to break our systems, and that's also how we manage this situation and preparing for them. So I would say, we are in a position where everything auto scales. I'm sure there's some forgotten place in some internal infrastructure that people were like, yeah, you remember this that has a weird name that was developed 10 years ago. It's still there. So I'm sure there are some places like that. But for our customers and consumers, we're pretty safe from scalability.
And you mentioned some programs that are kind of testing it out, or trying. Is there also from a testing perspective? That from a resilience perspective, did you go also into kind of chaos engineering and some of those things to really stress test your systems, your environments?
Yes. Those were some of the principles that we set up doing chaos engineering. And when Netflix presented the Chaos Monkeys, that was the first thing our infrastructure engineer came in, and they were like, we're doing this. The product engineers were not very happy about it, of our work being tested. But we did all that.
I'm sure that they got, at some point, they got happier once things got the chance to improve on them after testing them, right? So
of course. And the same with security. We've been running different type of programs to test from security perspective, and making sure our application is ready for almost anything.
Maybe one thing that I would like to touch upon is also that from a re-architecturing perspective, there's also the side of the teams themselves, right? And you alluded a little bit to it when you said that we were having more and more teams, but we had this big dependency on the monolith, and it was very hard to coordinate things. How was that something that you did? And I guess we could probably refer back to Conway's law and the kind of the structure at some point. How is it, the Conway's law? The structure of your infrastructure will usually reflect the structure of your teams, of your organization. So is that, I hope I'm not murdering the law, is that something that you also saw or considering during the transformation, kind of, or put it another way, what was your kind of the more unexpected things, if you will, from an engineering side as part of this? I know that's two very different points, but
looking at the size of majority of companies, even today, we've been on the small size. So, and I would say that's also part of the decisions we took in terms of the architecture and the technology that we've used, because it allowed us to run as small teams. So even when I say in the beginning, when I joined, we were 2 teams. That was the size of the product and tech, and then we doubled to 4 teams, and then 6. And today, in my team, in my area, which is the engineering space and applied AI, we are about 90 people, including leaders in this space. So it's still, compared with many other organizations at this level, we are still on the small side. And it's because we apply some of those principles of the infrastructure, of reusing, of introducing templates, of how we name services was something that might sound as a small detail, but it helps when it comes to how easy it is to onboard someone in the team, how fast can they be productive, and how many people do you need to to run the business. How big does your infrastructure need to be? If you run everything in house, then probably only that team will be around half of what the whole engineering team is for us. So all these small details, everything, how you design infrastructure, tech, programming languages, the more you have, the more people you'll need to have, because you can't just have one person that knows something. You'll need to have at least 3 or 4 to be on the safe side. But when you use the same technology everywhere, it's easy to be flexible, to adapt. And we also chose technology that is known in the industry. So sometimes it might have looked more interesting and better, a new programming language or a new service that came out, but we decided against it because we looked at, well, do we need to now educate every person that comes in the business? And it will be super hard for us to attract people because we have this very niche technology. So all of these decisions played a part in us trying to stay small, because the bigger you become, the harder it is to develop and be fast.
And how... kind of what have you seen, or how have you seen the AI and generative AI in particular kind of impacting that work on the engineering side in the last years?
Yes, I knew that was coming. I knew it.
Yeah. It wasn't planned, but it
no.
It did come up. So
all fair. So even with Gen AI, so was trying to think of years now. I'll just say when Copilot came in.
So is that GitHub Copilot?
Yes, GitHub Copilot. When that was even beta launched, we said we want in. We want to test it out.
Do you know when? I actually don't know when.
Was it? Yeah, I believe 22 or 23. I can't remember this part. But I know, it was fairly new. And we said we want to introduce this to the team. It was quite a discussion from a security point of view, and who owns what, and what are you giving? You're giving the code, and so on. We passed all those discussions, and we enabled everyone to use GitHub Copilot, which again was in a period when we had to make ourselves much more fast at developing new products for the business. So we introduced that fairly.
And Perseo is telling me in my ear that it was in October 2021.
It was not that great.
It was the early days of, I guess.
It was not that great to start with, but at least the repetitive areas they could it can handle it. It could handle it even at that time. So we.
So it was a lot about kind of auto-completion. Was that most of the...
Yeah, exactly. That's what was doing. And that was great for creating tests or like the structure of the testing and so on. So we introduced that from the beginning. We're still using it and looking at the data, try to compare. I always try to compare to what others are doing and where are we. And looking at the data, we are kind of at the top of what other companies see from how much their engineers are accepting, like the acceptance rate.
Okay, so not from a percentage of code that is AI generated, but more around kind of the subjective perspective from the people working with it.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, from getting a lot of code in, or like the quality is like, this is the engineers will see, okay, how much time did they spend, right? If they got 100 lines of code and then they only accept 1 line, it's probably not that great if they had to look at the 100 lines. But if they accept 50% of those lines of code, well, probably was good. So in that way, looking at GitHub Copilot
for more like I guess a confidence level on the work, on the usefulness. Okay.
Yeah. And then as more technology and AI came in, so in Trustpilot, I've also been leading the applied AI team, and that's the team that's been quite advanced when it comes to AI, and they've been the first. So when I come with and when I get this question of like, oh, Jenny, what have you done? That team will be like, we've been doing this for years, way before any of these ChatGPT and so on came in. So in terms of products that we've been offering to businesses, we've been using Gen AI technology for many, many years. And that's where like internally the teams have been making use of this. But then on the productivity side, it's still going on. Even at the moment, looking at, okay, what's the next, like GitHub Copilot was the first one. We got into that. What's next to make us even more productive?
And would you like to tell us a little bit more about, because I understand that your journey, your career you're making some changes now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I decided to leave Trustpilot and to actually start something on my own. So now the plan is to try some of the ideas and some of the things I did at Trustpilot in other companies. So I'm looking to help multiple organizations through consultancy and advising, and keep my skills sharp that way, and seeing what others do and how I can apply the knowledge that I gain at Trustpilot in other organizations. And besides that, I'm also looking at creating my own tech company. That's the dream. That's always been the dream, and I feel like now is the perfect opportunity with everything that's happening in our industry with Gen AI. And I always say companies that started with being cloud native, they had a huge advantage compared to the companies that were before. And it's probably the same now. Companies that start with AI native, they'll have a huge advantage compared to the companies that started before, because all these other companies, they need to go through a transformation. I've done lots of transformations myself, and they're not easy. It takes time to change how people think, how organizations are working. But when you start with a blank page and you start with that from the start, it's much easier, and you can be so much faster. So that's the plan for the future. And I'm very excited about what's coming, what's going to come next, because there are so many skills that I'm already learning, and that's what I've always enjoyed, is to learn and grow and develop myself as a person and as a leader.
I'll be following. It sounds. I'm looking forward to see what comes out of that. And we are kind of wrapping up. Are you ready for a couple of rapid fire questions?
Yeah, of course.
So don't overthink it. Just so, is there a book, podcast, thought leader that you would recommend people to follow?
Yes. So I'll combine the book and thought leader. So someone I would recommend it. His name is Chester Elton, sorry. And he wrote the book called Leading with Gratitude, and he's a coach as well. And I had the opportunity of meeting him last year and having a coaching session, and he's amazing. And right now he started to create more content online. So I would recommend people
So we get 2 for 1 there?
Yeah, 2 for 1. And then in terms of a podcast, I would say Lenny's podcast. I really like that. It combines engineering, product, leadership. So it's perfect for the type of content I like to digest.
And so another question: is there any professional advice that you would give your younger self? I guess you can look at it two ways. Either your younger self or someone that is starting in this area, or starting their career now.
I would say something that would have helped me is to not be afraid to make mistakes, and don't think the people around you know everything. I had that impression when starting, thinking that everyone is so much better and didn't have the answer to everything, and I was scared to ask questions. So ask questions, don't be afraid. The only advantage the others have is that they've done that a little bit longer than you, but that doesn't mean they know everything also. So just don't be afraid.
Last question. To you, scalability is?
Scalability is growing without breaking what makes you excellent.
Huh?
And the way I would say that is in tech means architecture that can handle the amount of users you have. In teams means processes that don't hinder creativity. And in leadership, it means knowing when to step out, so you let others to step in.
Very good.
That's what I would say scalability is for me.
It's a wonderful answer. That's a great way to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And that's it for this episode of the Smooth Scaling Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing and perhaps share it with a friend or colleague. If you want to share any thoughts or comments with us, send them to smoothscaling@qit.com. This podcast is researched by Joseph Thwaites, produced by Perseo Mandilo, and brought to you by Qit, your virtual waiting room partner. I'm your host, Jose Quaresma. Until next time, keep it smooth, keep it scalable.